All right. Good afternoon. My name is Charlesia McKinney. She, her pronouns, and I'm a PhD candidate in the Department of English in Rhetoric and Composition. This year, the Emily Taylor Center and the Office of Multicultural Affairs are partnering to uplift voices of Black women, femme, and non-binary writers by inviting Black women, femmes, and non-binary people at KU to take part in the Free Black Women's Library, the annual reading challenge. And today, I'll be reading excerpts from Bad Fat Black Girl, Notes on a Trap Feminism by Sesali Bowen. I'm going to switch frames because these clear ones are trying to play me. But I'm in a good mood today, so we're going to have a good time. So I want to make known, I had all of these plans to play music in between the readings because there is actually a mixtape that goes with this book. So I do encourage y'all to look it up. And I think it's just, if you type in Trap Feminist on wherever you get your music, it should come up. Our girl is hot. Let me breathe through it. Okay, third pair. I think this will work. So, because Instagram doesn't allow us to play music in between, I want you to just kind of imagine that there's music playing right now. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start with the epilogue, and then from there, I will read different excerpts of this really amazing book. And in many ways, I'm reading through it with you all as this text is one that I've been wanting to get to, but hadn't yet. And so I'm using this as an opportunity to get into it. And I look forward to y'all's reactions in the comments. So first, we'll start with the dedication, which is to all the real bitches. That's who the dedication is to. So now I would like to skip to the epilogue and read from there. Sorry, the copy that I had earlier was allowing me to bounce around a little easier. All right, here we go. So the epilogue is titled Real Bitch, and there's an epigraph at the beginning of each chapter. And this one says, real bitch, authentic, best believe I put my heart in it. So when I was shopping around the proposal for this book, one of the editors who passed on it offered my agent some feedback. Publishers like to keep the target audience for their books pretty broad, and this editor, a Black woman, thought that focusing on the specific subset of trap girls left way too many folks out. Her feedback was that women who were older and more settled into their professional lives, or even those who didn't have ties to the hood, wouldn't be able to relate. For her, trap feminism felt like something that only young, ratchet Black girls could relate to. And here's where I would pause and like to ask each of us to hold, when you hear trap feminism, what associations comes up for you, or what questions does that make you curious about? So it was a disappointing take on my work, but one that made sense in the context of our current landscape. We're obsessed with Black women right now. Names like Tracee Ellis Ross and Elaine Welteroth are trendy as Black women who represent affluence, success, and taste-making. They're amazing women, but their proximity to institutions and industries of power have made them more marketable and easier to love. So within the media industry, many of my colleagues who are tapped in to weigh on Black culture are those who have similar access and backgrounds. They come from privilege I did not know, and they have had to untangle their Blackness from the web of whiteness they were socialized in. We're obsessed with Black girls who have reached these heights of assimilation. Seriously, if I have to see another fucking series, movie, article, podcast, or stage play about a black girl self-actualizing in her mostly white school, friend group, neighborhood, relationship, or job, I'm going to scream. Here, also within each chapter, there's a definition that Bowen provides, and here the definition is ratchet, which she defines as reclaimed and embraced by some black women to simply mean lively and exciting, but ratchet is also often used to describe black women who are considered ghetto and uncouth. So I get why so much room has been carved out for these kinds of black girls. Reckoning with whiteness and expectations of the white gaze is a valid part of the black experience, especially in the U.S. But these women do represent the majority of us. Most of us learn to love our hair, our bodies, our skin, our people, and our culture by just having them. I would actually question if we had to learn how to do these things at all. For most black girls, it was just part of our upbringing to rock with ourselves and our culture. It's the same culture that inspires trap music. Have most black women lived in housing projects or ghettos, sold pussy, been arrested, or gotten into at least one physical fight in their lifetime? No. But are most black women touched by the realities of economic uncertainty, hair discrimination, intimate partner violence, bias, sexual repression, and/or hosting other intersecting oppressions at some point in their lives? You're damn right. So as such, we've all benefited from the resourceful and creative responses to the disenfranchisement I've outlined in this book, and the responses that are innovated by ratchet black girls. Even if it's something as simple as laying our baby hair down or knowing how to find the best deal on school clothes. Even an artsy chick who's into crystals and meditation can shake her ass. Fat body positive influencers are using female rap to frame their ideologies around radical self-love. And even though they don't inhabit bodies that look like the women in the music industry, they've rallied around the idea that their marginalized bodies also deserve luxury. I've been to events attended by alums of Ivy Leagues and employees of Big Pharma who were black. Their degrees and prestigious STEM jobs aside, they also like trap music and my long-ass nails. People try to erase ratchet black girls at every turn, but we are not siloed, and our impact is undeniable. In the same way that hip-hop is consumed by diverse audiences all over the world, so are the trends that are set by ghetto-ass black girls. Our style, our language, and our beauty resonate with people across different backgrounds. Just look at all the white influencers who were making millions by appropriating black culture or flat out blackfishing. Everyone who wants a fat ass and a colorful weave. And it's not a coincidence that the editor for this book who was most excited about the potential of this book is a white woman. People are obsessed with hood bitches, whether we care to admit it or not. But to the point of that first editor who passed on my proposal, there are some things about trap feminism that cannot be contained by theory, politics, or curriculum. It's about the values you were raised with and the conditioning you were socialized under. And that is hard to translate to a broader audience. A lot of trap feminism is about having heart. It's a unique cocktail of integrity, common sense, confidence, empathy, courage, and resilience. These are the traits that you can't quantify or learn out of a textbook. If you've made it this far and you're still wondering whether or not you're a trap feminist, you need to ask yourself something that you've probably never been asked on a job interview or even a date. And that question is, are you a real bitch? Being a real bitch is fundamentally more important than being a bad bitch, a rich bitch, a freak bitch, or even that bitch, because all of those things are dictated to us by a culture that relies on our subjugation. So can you make good judgment calls under pressure? Do you say what you mean and mean what you say? And are you principled when it comes to your people? This is the real spirit of trap feminism. And I don't think this shit is new either. I like to think that Harriet Tubman was a trap feminist. Because trap feminism was in Joe Morgan's When Chicken Heads Come Home to Roost and on Lil' Kim's Hardcore album. Now it's found in Mulatto's debut album, Queen of the South, and explicitly named in this book. In 10 years, it may have transformed into something else as Black girls continue to traverse the physical and digital worlds and engage with new forms of technology and adversity. When I envision a trap feminist future, it's one in which even more Black women are willing to lead with the intention to be real bitches. I'm going to read that again. So when I envision a trap feminist future, it's one in which even more Black women are willing to lead with the intention to be real bitches. And I see some in the comments where I'm like, when I'm thinking of real bitches, I'm thinking of y'all. I'm like Nikita, Jordan, Allie, I see y'all. And if there's more folks that I can't see. Okay, so let's see. So there is hope for me in that future. It's a future that allows for Black women to be our full selves without fear of mockery, denial, judgment, persecution, violence, or death. We can build relationships and families that fit the needs of our lives, as opposed to a socially acceptable scripted version that requires us to sacrifice parts of ourselves. I'm looking forward to a future in which we can love who we want, fuck who we want, and turn up how we want. We can stay in our bags and actually enjoy the fruits of our labor without having to sacrifice any parts of who we are in order to get there. I'm hearing a pleasure pedagogy there, so we can come back to where pleasure is also showing up in this work. So we'll be able to stand in all of that power, smacking our lips, rolling our necks, playing our games, and singing our songs. I wanted to write this book because the stories of Black girls like Nina Pop and Breonna Taylor should be included in the Black cultural lexicon before it's time to put their faces on a t-shirt. It's cute to call all non-Black folks for cultural appropriation while judging Black women with thick fake lash extensions and outfits from Rainbow. Yes, shout out to Rainbow. For not making their style choices more Vogue adjacent. Who used to shop at Rainbow? Put that in the comments. That was my store. So I wrote this book because ghetto girls are far more than political martyrs and mood boards. We are not caricatures, and we don't need to be saved. We deserve to be heard, have our humanity taken seriously, and trusted to lead our own rebellions and revolutions. But until then, we'll keep whipping in our kitchens, finessing, and glowing up the best ways we know how. Okay, so y'all, that was just the epilogue. So that's actually how Sesali ends the book, but I thought it gave us some good context to kind of start there. I'd be very interested to hear what's standing out to you all from the epilogue while I get these frames together. Because now what we'll do next is we'll jump to the introduction, which is titled Trap Feminism. And if Instagram wasn't such a hater, I'd be able to play some music for y'all in between. Because those who joined, if you missed it in the beginning, I was saying that there's actually a whole mixtape that goes with this book. And each chapter has like a song that go with it. And Sesali wrote it all herself because she said, you know, writers write. So writers can do all those things. You know, glasses, I've been wearing glasses since I was like 2 or 3, but they always try to play you when, you know, your face is a little hot and the steam be at the bottom, and I can't stand to see that. So, okay. All right, so now we're going to go to the introduction, which is titled Trap Feminism. And I hope, is the volume okay? Too loud, too soft? Do I need to make it any louder? I'm kind of loud, so it's probably all right. And let me check my time. Okay. I see my little chair was scooting down the whole time, but we're going to make it work. All right, so introduction. Trap Feminism. The epigraph for this chapter is from Yo Gotti, I Wanna Fuck. So this is for my jazzy bitches, classy bitches, and oh yeah, my ratchet bitches. Thank you for dropping the Spotify link. So throughout my entire college career and for years after, I was the proud owner of a 2007 Pontiac Grand Prix. Please look, what was y'all's first car? I had a Saturn, a green Saturn. So I named her Sandy because she was the exact same hue as the manufactured beaches off of Lake Michigan. The writer grew up in Chicago. So we love a Midwest baddie. So a few years later, after the Fetty Wap song dropped, I nicknamed her my trap queen because for the better part of a decade, she made sure I made it to classes, to work, to get my hair done, to pick up weed, to rescue homegirls from the homes of shady niggas, to pull off getaways after my homegirls got payback on those same shady niggas, to countless dick appointments and into 2-car accidents. Sandy had heated leather seats and a sound system that allowed everyone to hear me coming from a block away, but when I had the volume all the way up. Some of the best and worst times of my life happened in the driver's seat and sometimes in the back seat of the car. You'll hear quite a bit about Sandy later. Her name is probably the only one besides mine that hasn't been changed for this book. Anyway, I was definitely in Sandy's driver's seat when I heard Memphis rapper Yo Gotti's I Wanna Fuck for the first time. I was 3 years into college at the best public institution in Illinois without a degree in sight thanks to my struggling GPA. My cousin had recently graduated high school and joined my friends and me in the Midwestern cornfields to attend the local community college. She was living without parental supervision for the first time in her life, and it didn't take long from her boyfriend from Chicago to join her in her off-campus apartment. The three of us spent a lot of time together riding around and smoking weed, which probably explains my GPA. It was on one of our many trips that her boyfriend slid his bootleg copy of Yo Gotti's mixtape, Cocaine Music, into Sandy's CD player, and he never got it back. Yes, to mixtapes. He used to make mixtapes back in the day. My friend Rondell used to be the one to give us those in 8th grade. I wish I still had them. In any case, the disc quickly collected scratches from going in and out of my rotation, and I listened to track 4, I Wanna Fuck, the most because the first verse felt like it had been written for me. I was occasionally jazzy, sometimes classy, but mostly ratchet, just like the women he was shouting out at the top of the verse. And though I've never sucked dick in a club, which was another one of his identifiers of such a lady, there was an incident at the now closed Lux Lounge in Washington, D.C., where a dude put his dick in my hand and I took my precious time removing it. The point is, as a sexually open-minded black girl, I felt seen by Gotti. This verse was his playful ode to those among us who were willing to put our wigs in a rubber band and let loose in a night out. It's not often in any genre of music that women who also looked forward to the after club activities have been celebrated as opposed to shamed and shitted on for it. The more I listened to the song, the more attention I paid to the second part of the verse where Gotti took his affirmation a step further. Right after a particularly childish line where he tried to distance himself from cunnilingus, I always say that wrong. Eating pussy is what it's talking about, though. So by suggesting that he only ate at Waffle House or Huddle House, he laid out one of the most thoughtful and empathetic, responsible, and equitable casual sex scenarios that I'd ever heard of in this context. I was grateful for a reference to his favorite condom brand, even though it was the gold wrap magnums that smell like a literal latex factory and make the inside of my vagina feel dry and itchy like a burlap sack. Safe sex is an underrated wave that more people should be on, but is often glossed over in music, movies, and TV, where sex is frequently depicted with an undertone of urgency and reckless spontaneity. Gotti also completely detached himself from the hypocritical shame on you, whole finger wagging that male privilege emboldens that so many black men do, especially in hip hop. In fact, he explicitly stated that he could still respect her after their first night encounter because shit, he was there too. So at one point in the verse, he was almost encouraging her to stand pridefully in her decision and to not use intoxication to justify her decision to bust it open for a Memphis nigga. In other words, Gotti didn't devalue or dehumanize this woman because she decided to give him some pussy. He wasn't ashamed, and for that reason, he didn't think she should be either. I wish I could say every man I fucked made me feel the same way, but this verse would do. So to be clear, Yo Gotti didn't write a feminist manifesto. Having followed his career in different interviews he's done, I would argue that he could benefit from a YouTube video or two on black feminism. And if I'm lucky, he'll read this book, but I digress. Gotti did lay out an alternative to how women, especially black women, in similar situations are too often represented, acting only on the sexual desires of men, of lesser moral character for doing so, and not worth the respect of the same men who want to fuck them. I was already hyper aware of this dynamic and actively navigating it in my personal life. However, this verse made me reconsider how women who were being talked about in trap music, a hip-hop subgenre that expresses some of the realities and aspirational views of black folks from the hood, and how those narratives held up against the regular women I knew in the real world. So from that moment, I felt like I needed to re-listen to all the trap music I loved and reconsider what I was being offered. So despite its mainstream popularity, trap music is still considered one of hip-hop's lowest forms. Part of this stems from elitist assumptions about Southern black culture, including the accents and unique version of African American vernacular and respectability politics. However, trap music is also often dismissed because of its representation and treatment of women. And as a feminist, I'd often consider the question of why I not only subjected myself to it, but reveled in it. It's a little dark. Sitting with Gotti's verse pushed me beyond my frequent cop-out response. Trap music is problematic and sexist, but I like the beats. Like every other staple in black women's lives, it was more complicated than that. Here in the middle of this chapter, she puts in a definition of trap, which is Atlanta slang for the specific dwelling or neighborhood where drugs, guns, or other illicit products or services are sold. This term is multifaceted and flexible. When used as a verb, trapping means hustling. You can use trap bitch or trap nigga or simply trapper to describe someone who hustles, typically in an underground economy. Trap music got its name because its pioneering artists were indeed trap niggas, and the lyrical content reflects the realities of the trap. Yeah, I was like, I hope Nikita heard the shout out to ATL. Okay, so still, it felt initially counterintuitive to look for examples of affirming language in a trap, a genre that had been labeled aggressively reductive. But there was a reason some trap songs made me put more bass in my voice when I shouted the lyrics over Sandy's speaker or my hands in the air at the club. I suddenly paid more attention to all the times Gucci Mane also openly rapped about his partners having abortions. I thought differently about Travis Porter letting a female's voice dominate their single Make It Rain with a straightforward demand, you want to see some ass, I want to see some cash. And what about all of the female rap I'd been devouring since I was old enough to control the radio? Female rappers have often echoed the sentiments of male rappers, that sex and desire are indeed transactional. But the formula laid out on Trick Daddy's 1998 single 9, when the baddest bitch Trina insisted, you don't know, Nan Ho, who been the places I've been, who can spend the grands that I spend, fuck about 5 or 6 best friends. Imply that there was also an art to the specific role that women play in these interactions. On Big Ol' Freak, Meg Thee Stallion says, you can't take no nigga from me, I got mind control. That's not the position of a passive receiver of male attention, but that of a strategic mastermind set on creating sexual relationships on her own terms. So over decades of listening to female rappers, I learned to prioritize my own desires, ambitions, and pleasures because of all the ways that they might reflect how men talk about us in their rhymes. These women are also adding a key piece of nuance that these niggas would rather everyone look over. Women, especially black women, are inherently valuable. This was the beginning of trap feminism for me. The moment I realized I was evolving not away from trap, but in a full circle back to it. I wouldn't accept the idea that no good could come out of trap music. I wanted to reconcile the fact that some of my favorite trap songs made me, a queer black woman, feel good, proud, and even inspired. Perhaps not all of the lyrics about women were cause for outrage or dismissal, but actual depictions of black girl joy, black girl genius, and black girl survival were at play, even if unintentional. And I love that parsing out of what trap music does. If y'all feel like you have a connection to trap music, I'd love to hear like what it creates. for you as well. So here listing Black Girl Joy, Black Girl Genius, and Black Girl Survival. But I know that there's also so much more. So in the past, trap seemed to be at odds with the rest of my identity as a feminist. I'd been advocating for Black women, leading organizing efforts around issues like free access to birth control and teaching incoming freshmen about rape culture. But now I no longer seem contradictory to be bumping Gucci or Jeezy at full volume while whipping Sandy around campus. I'd taken a gender studies course with the brilliant Dr. Ruth Nicole Brown about Black girlhood, where she encouraged to sit with the fullness of being both Black and girl identified. And she was one of the first people to put the bug in my ear of what other people saw as chaotic, deviant, or just ghetto as hell was just the stuff that Black girl fire was made out of. Here, I think it's really interesting that we're seeing more texts that are in conversation with this one. Because I'm also thinking of Roxane Gay's Bad Feminist and what ideas we have around what are the boundaries of feminist concern and what feminists can do or contradictions feminists can hold at the same time. I'd be interested in any other texts that are maybe coming to y'all in the moment if you want to put those in the comments. Okay, where was I? I get to talking. But actually, I think, let me scroll ahead because I may... Okay, I'll read this last part of this introduction and then we'll move to another chapter. So I said Trap Feminism out loud for the first time during a road trip from DC to Chicago, because by that time I had already been writing about pop culture through a feminist lens at feministing.com. And I was calling out Miley Cyrus for cultural appropriation during her weird twerking phase and advocating for more representation of fat girls on screen. And I had finally seen myself through 6 years of undergrad and had a gender studies degree to show for it. So I'd been recognized as a reproductive justice advocate, and through that I was a good feminist. So midway through our 12-hour ride, my homegirl and I exited the highway at a rest stop to grab some Burger King and empty our bladders. Somehow we found ourselves staring at a bulletin board with the faces of missing persons looking back at us. An overwhelming amount of them were Black girls still in their teens. These flimsy pieces of paper, likely to be overlooked, were probably the strongest effort that would be made from the authorities to bring any of them back home. It's one of those hard pills that you learn to swallow as a Black girl. And rather than rage against it, you just try your damnedest to not go missing. Neither my homegirl nor I wondered if any of those Black girls staring back at us had an unfortunate run-in with the serial killer or were captured to have their organs harvested on the black market. With our whoppers in hand and bitter resolve in our hearts, we both resigned ourselves to the more familiar but just as disturbing possibility. These girls were most likely in the company of Black men and working in the sex trade at their behest. We shared a brief, silent moment filled with recognizable disgust and anger, having been confronted once again with the reality that Black women often face the most intimate forms of violence at the hands of Black men. Male rappers still sell a fantasy of pimping women who are so enamored by their men's charms that they're willing to seduce and sleep with other men to make the man they've devoted to themselves richer. They sell a version of pimping that ignores the social, economic, and physical risk for women in these relationships, assuming that the kind of woman who would get into the game are already too far gone. No one takes the time to separate the pimping that rappers talk about from the reality of sex trafficking for most young Black women. Getting turned out by grown, manipulative, violent, and lazy-ass men who aren't willing to make money by more ethical means, like, in my opinion, sucking dick to earn it themselves. So back in the car at the rest stop, homegirl and I spent a bunch of time talking about the dissonance of being Black girls in community with Black men, but also subject to their sexism, and that's the rest of the world. So at some point in the dialogue, probably in between recounting the first time an adult man propositioned me to get some money from these niggas, which he clearly wanted to pocket for himself, and still loving Lil Wayne's verse on Where to Cash At, I mentioned my love for Gotti's I Wanna Fuck verse. And as we danced through words and whatever music Sandy was playing, we laughed and just as we easily transitioned from joy to shame to optimism to hopelessness. It was complicated, and that was okay. Yes, hear that, y'all. We can hold all of that at the same time. So this whole conversation is like trap feminism, I suggested. I glanced over at her, waiting for a reaction that would tell me whether or not this was corny. And it wasn't. She agreed that this was my green light and to keep going and talking. Okay, so I'll stop with, that's really only like half. That's about half of the introduction. So there's another half that y'all can get to, but I want to read a snippet of another chapter. So we'll go to chapter 1, which is titled Bad Bitches Only. And this epigraph is Gucci Mane's Pussy Print. Why this bitch keep hitting my line? She knowing she ain't no diamond shit. How y'all doing? I see y'all going off in the comments with the books. Love it. What to say? Okay. All right. So chapter 1, Bad Bitches Only. I'm fat. Let's start there. Not only am I fat, the ancestors saw fit to deny me the proportions that are so frequently admired in other black women. The way I feel red already. So rather than collect my excess in rounded hips and ass, most of it has decided to settle in my arms, back, and what I affectionately call my tire, the circumference around my lower abdomen, which includes the space above where my ass crack ends and my sagging belly. You know, shout out to the big belly bitches. You know, I'm really seeing you. Flat is an understatement when describing my ass. My butt is more square-shaped than anything else, and from certain angles, it appears to be actively trying to squeeze itself into the rest of me, perhaps hoping, even after all these years, to get some of the wiggle and the rest of my body has in its abundance. I'm tall, not WNBA tall, but I'm 5'8". I'm taller than most women, and my legs didn't seem to get the memo about what size the rest of my body wanted to be. If I'm a size 22 up top, I'm a size 18 in the legs. For the sake of comparison, it was once said on Facebook that I'm shaped not unlike a wisdom tooth. Stop. I can't. Ooh. So on my more disparaging days, I feel boxy. When I'm feeling more gracious and accepting, which is the majority of the time, I settle on wavy as a good descriptor of what I look like. It's more than curvy, but soft and jiggly. According to the kids, and by kids I mean folks of all ages who body shame on the internet, I'm built bad. I've always been fat. I didn't get pregnant or have a medical condition that caused me to gain weight. My metabolism didn't slow down as I got older, causing my weight to suddenly skyrocket. I was called Buddha baby when I was an infant because I was so round and damn near bald. There was a picture of me sitting on top of one of my granddaddy's Cadillacs, not even a year old, with the strap of my summer onesie falling off one shoulder and exposing a whole infant boob. In 4th grade, I wore a stretchy knit dress that touched my ankles along with my first pair of chunky platform heels, if 2.5 inches counts as heels. I felt sexy and cool, like the 6th Spice Girl. Seeing me in the get-up, my granny couldn't contain her laughter or her assessment that I actually looked like a stuffed sausage. My body has always been in excess of what is deemed acceptable and appropriate and outside what we're told is sexy and pretty. In elementary, middle, and high schools, I was one of the fat kids. It was a sin made worse as I aged, and instead of acclimating, I just became more wavy. I have been reminded of this failure often and loudly. There is a myth that black people aren't fat phobic, and bigger black women by extension are confident and unaffected by their size, and we need to put that to rest right now. Generally speaking, black people do have a higher tolerance for body fat on feminine bodies than other groups do. We like our women to have some meat on their bones, something to grab onto, or to put it plainly, we like them thick. But thick and fat are not the same thing. The difference between being a big fine and just being big has as much, if not more, to do with body shape as it does body mass. A woman twice my weight can still be stamped bad bitch if she carries her weight everywhere but her midsection. Hourglass and pear-shaped women are typically celebrated amongst black folks and idolized in trap music. Young Dolph, R.I.P., said, if she ain't got a fat ass and she can't get up in this car, describing a girl he shouldn't have to fuck for free. Drake said on her, stomach on flat, ass on what's that? I could go on for days, but you get where I'm headed. There is a formula for what makes a bad bitch, and it starts with an impressive hip-to-waist ratio. Right beyond that, though, are the familiar trappings of fat phobia. You ever peep how many exceptions there are to the hourglass standard? Excuse me, let me start over. You ever peep how many exceptions to the hourglass standard are made for black girls who were thinner? Think Rihanna, Ciara, Halle Berry, Tyra Banks, or any of the unshapely, skinny, light-skinned girls you went to school with. We call those women who are shaped less like hourglass and more like the hour hand on a clock slim thick or model material, and keep it moving without comment. But have you ever noticed that there are no such concessions made for black fat girls ever? White beauty norms will always find themselves a seat at the table, even ours, and that includes vicious fat phobia. If you're a black girl like me, with the misfortune of being both fat and built bad, existing outside the aesthetic rules means that you've committed an egregious act against the social order. Women who find themselves far too away from the center of beauty norms are often treated as if they've committed treason. Our aesthetic to a public-facing betrayal of our own refusal to conform, our refusal to go any lengths necessary to be valuable to society, specifically to its men. Here, there's a definition of bad bitch, defined as a woman or femme who impresses herself and others by way of her body, success, attitude, style, fashion, values, and or behavior. Okay, let me see. Okay, so I'll actually end with that definition there, but this chapter goes on to talk more about beauty and how it's entangled with fat phobia. Are y'all loving this book so far or what? I'm really enjoying this. So let's go to another chapter. Let me get back to the table of contents. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead to chapter 7, which is titled Not Straight. First epigraph from Dream Doll. Came with my niggas and left with a baddie. My mama took me to my first pride celebration when I was around 15, but she refused to tell me what it was. She said, we're going to a picnic. Whenever I asked her about the day's plans, I knew she was on some kind of bullshit and I couldn't put my finger on what was going on. We weren't the kind of mama-daughter duo that would just go on random picnics to spend quality time together. But she was putting on makeup and had an outfit picked out for the occasion. I was expected to get cute too. When I pressed her about who was hosting this event or what the theme of it might be, it could have been a birthday party, a family reunion, or an outdoor work potluck for all, I knew. She doubled down on the fact that it was just a picnic. This was still a few years before social media and the internet were a major part of our lives, so I had no clue that it was a Pride weekend in Chicago. I just had to ride along wherever my mama took me and take in the day's events as they unfolded. So the picnic was at a beach park on the south side, and I realized almost immediately why my mama was being so weird about the shit. First of all, picnic was clearly an understatement. There were hundreds of people in attendance, and rainbow-colored paraphernalia was everywhere. Smoke from portable barbecue grills, blunts, and Newport cigarettes rose above the sea of moving black bodies. Several speaker systems and boom boxes competed for dominance over a crowd that was eating, drinking, talking, laughing, dancing, and maneuvering from one part of the grassy area to another. Despite the colorful rainbows, I noticed pretty quickly that there weren't a lot of other kids there. There were hardly any men there either. At least there weren't a lot of people that I would have labeled as men. Knowing now what I know about gender, I recognize that my teen interpretation of anyone's gender wasn't necessarily aligned with their actual gender identity. I tried not to stare at the few people I read as men who strutted by me in jeans with pockets completely cut out, exposing their butt cheeks, or with full faces of makeup or glitter cascading down their exposed chests, past chains, and connected to nipple rings. The majority of the partygoers were women, and many of them were masculine-presenting studs. One of those studs was my mama's girlfriend, whom I'd already met. As much as I would love to brag that my mama was being proactive about immersing me in queer culture or exposing me to different sides of life, I don't think it was that deep. She actually had no clue how I would react to that environment, but she wanted to kick it with her boo and their friends. This wasn't an event for me, which is why she didn't tell me where we were going. There just came a time where she and my dad broke up and she dated women, specifically studs. I almost respect her more for taking this approach. There would have been nothing I could do or say to change how she felt about the people she loved and fucked. It was just something I had to accept. More homophobes need this energy, but I digress. I guess my mama assumed that if I didn't speak out in protest of her lifestyle, there was nothing to talk about. And she was right. I would just have to deal. But I never have a problem with the fact that my mom liked women. Any issues I've ever had with people my mama dated had nothing to do with their gender identity or sexual orientation. She would get no such protest from me at that first Pride either, even though it was for grown folks. I was excited by the outlandish outfits and pure joy surrounding me. Being around so many queer people wasn't disgusting or offensive to me, but I was scared that I would be perceived as one of them. At this age, I thought I was straight. Ooh, how many of us thought that? And in case you haven't heard, heterosexuality is insecure and extremely fragile. It needs to be performed and defended at all costs. It's basically the short cis man of the sexuality spectrum. Add that to my inflated teenage ego, and my primary source of discomfort was that someone would think that I too was family. I didn't have a problem with queer people, but I was not ready to be called one. I wondered how shooting the shit at Pride might somehow stain my record. This fear kicked into overdrive when two of my male classmates recognized me in the crowd, and I loudly exaggerated the fact that my mama dragged me to the event with her friends, and they truly didn't give two fucks about it. They offered a few more niceties and went right on their way. In fact, I was so busy deflecting that I hardly noticed what a hurry they seemed to be in getting away from me. And I didn't even think to ask them what they were doing there. Attending Pride for the first time helped me begin to understand there was a such thing as a queer community. It normalized being queer in a major way for me. I had definitely seen gay people before this moment. There was obviously my mama and her partners. There was a flamboyantly gay man I occasionally ran into at the corner store. And there was a fine-ass stud I noticed playing basketball with guys at the park. I've had gay classmates consistently since the 7th grade, but I thought all of these people as isolated entities. Gay people were talked about in only one or two ways back in the day. They were either mentioned in hushed tones and whispers by straight people or scandalously caricatured on media like Jerry Springer and Jenny Jones. Lord, I remember watching those after school. A mess. Ricky Lake, can't forget. Okay, they certainly weren't treated with they certainly weren't treated with dignity or respect or welcomed as members of the community. So it was easy to dismiss them and their lifestyle as one-off exceptions to the laws of physical attraction. However, the sheer number of Black queer women at Pride proved it was highly unlikely to be as uncommon or underground as I had thought. The picnic was just a few minutes drive from the hood. These Black folks hadn't been bussed in from other parts of town. They were from these very same neighborhoods. And perhaps they weren't dressed in the same outfits that they would wear to school or work, but they were flexing no less. I made it a point after my first ever Pride to pay even closer attention to the Black folks I witnessed expanding the norms of gender and sexuality beyond barriers and binaries. I wondered who I may have overlooked or how many queer folks I was living amongst that I couldn't read or clock. I left Pride knowing without a doubt that there were already gays in the trap, and that there still are. Okay, so that's the first section of Not Straight. And let's see. There's a chapter called Fuck These Niggas, so I definitely got to read a portion from this. So let me skip ahead to see. Okay, so I'll read a small small portion of Fuck These Niggas, and then we'll end with the last chapter. So I knew there was hope for us after the hot girl summer of 2019. Taking their name from one of Meg Thee Stallion monikers, hot girls ran the street right alongside their city girl counterparts. No one's nigga was safe. Stories of their partying, dating around, gladly taking men's money, and reveling in the pleasure that they got from their debauchery captured the minds and hearts of the masses. Their conquests were tagged, sometimes literally using hashtags, but often colloquially with labels like real hot girl shit and city girls up 10 points. They refused to play by the rules of modesty and courtesy, refused to perform a version of traditionally acceptable Black femininity, and refused to take any L's. They were decentering men in romantic relationships from their, I don't know if I know this word, zeitgeist, and winning while the world watched. Brands and corporations sought to capitalize off of Hot Girl Summer as a sticky catchphrase without understanding the real implications. A blueprint was being drawn that could actually liberate a generation of Black women who might otherwise play themselves. A Trap Feminist model for dating went viral, and I couldn't have been happier. Of course, city girls didn't invent fuck niggas get money model, although they have made excellent use of new technologies to expand its playing field. There have always been women who understood the game. The auntie that the rest of the women in your family whisper about, who's always traveling seemingly alone. The college classmate with the Louis Vuitton tote who people call a hoe, even though they can't confidently name one of her single body's sexual partners. The girl you suspect your nigga might just be cheating with. The girl you used to work with who was juggling 3 dudes 6 months ago, but just popped up on your Instagram feed engaged. These women who were called hoes and mocked for being single, but when it came down to it, seemed a lot happier than the married women who talk shit about them. Welp. They did exactly what the fuck they wanted to do and let the rest work itself out. These women have the cheat code. It's that boss bitch energy with a sprinkle of scandal that so many female rappers tap into in their songs and videos. So many of us assume that this version of reality is unattainable when we've actually been given a syllabus that we could have been using this whole time. A new G-Wagon might need to be worked into a 5-year plan, but you can love a life that benefits you and not some nigga this week. Let me read that again. That feels like that needs to be read again. So many of us assume that this version of reality is unattainable when we've actually been given a syllabus that we could have been using this whole time. Sure, a G-Wagon might need to be worked into a 5-year plan, but you can have a love life that benefits you and not some nigga this week. Before we dive into that, though, I want to make it clear that there is nothing you can do to stop a nigga from cheating. There is nothing you can do to stop a nigga from being abusive. You can be the perfect woman, have the fattest ass, make the best mac and cheese, have great credit, draw up a business plan that will make your boo a millionaire. You can run background checks, sit in his mama's face for hours asking questions about his childhood and his exes to get to know him better. You can pray, you can meditate, you can fast. None of it will stop a nigga from nigging if that's what a nigga wants to do. So y'all better hear that. And me also being the y'all. Nor is it your fault if he does. If a nigga is trash, that's on him. You don't have to take any of that on. What I hope to make plain is how you can avoid being completely shattered if he is. I hope you feel empowered enough to see fuck shit sooner and swerve right around it. I hope you feel empowered enough to see fuck shit sooner and to swerve right around it. Make a full U-turn if you have to. I hope you're able to honor a version of Black womanhood that is not tangled up and whether or not you've locked down a commitment from someone. I hope you understand that not having a nigga at all is actually better than having a trash one. I hope you understand that not having a nigga at all is better than having a trash one. For a third time, I hope that you understand that not having a nigga at all is better than having a trash one. And I'm going to share how I follow a trap feminist model in relationships and how I fumbled when I didn't. Every single thing may not apply to you in your specific circumstances, but I promise you the model hasn't let me down. So the way that the chapter is set up is it's like kind of what the thing is and then a long explanation of it. But for the sake of time, I'm just going to read each one so I can get to the last chapter. So the things that she considers, is one, taking care of myself. 2, I only date people who take care of themselves. 3, I live and date by my own morals and principles and no one else's. And 4, I set the tone. Let me make sure there's no more. 5, words and labels mean things, so I use them wisely. 6, I know when to walk away. Okay, and that's the last one. So it's like, if you go back to that chapter, which is chapter 8, it has some context underneath it. But with the last 5 minutes, I want to read a little bit of chapter 9, which is titled My Bitches. The epigraph is Dreezy, we gonna ride. She gonna ride till the wheels fall off. And when I was reading this yesterday, it was making me, think a lot about some of my friends and conversations that we had. So I wanted to read a portion of this to end. So there's one, and this chapter is called My Bitches. So there's one other rule I follow when I'm dating. I don't date people who don't take friendship seriously. It's a huge red flag, and anyone who wants to date me but doesn't want me to have any platonic friends is more than likely super controlling, possessive, and abusive. These kinds of people want to keep you isolated from your support system and anyone else who won't sit idly by while they terrorize you. At best, a partner requires too much of my time if they think our romantic relationship shouldn't leave me with any time to be in community with my bitches. I don't even entertain the problematic rhetoric that a relationship is only healthy if my friends are kept squarely out of it. I understand why people say that. They think that just because you might forgive your partner doesn't mean that your friends and family will forgive them if they know what the person has done and that there will always be tension. But that no friend shit still doesn't work for me. Like, the way this is speaking to my heart, my soul. So see, the way my friendships are set up, I know my friends are going to support me in my decisions, even if they don't agree with them. They don't have to fuck my partner. I do. Plus, having space to process my relationship is way more important to me than my partner feeling nervous that my friends don't like them. My homegirls give me that. They are my counsel. I don't need the gang to support my boo or my relationship. I need them to support me. These are going to be the women who will help me rob you if you fuck up, no matter how friendly they act when you're around. So don't get too excited for their approval. Keep it straight. So on the flip side, I'm also completely uninterested in dating anyone who doesn't have any friends themselves. Y'all, listen, especially if you have a lot of friends, listen, y'all want to make sure there's balance there. Because the last guy I was in relationship with was a serial monogamous, except he wasn't monogamous. When I met him, Levi was living with his then serious girlfriend. They broke up. He moved back in with his parents, and we were officially a couple a few weeks later. And while he had plenty of stories about his exes and old fuck buddies, I didn't know him to have a single homeboy or homegirl for that matter. That detail slipped right under me our first few months of the relationship, but eventually I saw how our lifestyles weren't balancing out. When I wasn't with him or at school or work, I was with my homegirls. I would reference them in conversations, and he'd met most of them, but I was getting none of that energy back from him. So one day I had to straight up ask, do you have any friends? I'd like to meet them. And he stared at me blankly. I could tell my inquiry had surprised him. He clearly hadn't considered that I might have been factoring his friendships into his personality profile. But the fact that he didn't have an answer for me also threw him off. He thought about it for a half second more and then stammered on some girl named Letitia. When he said they had met at a community college where he was taking classes, I told him I looked forward to meeting her and left it at that. Then she goes on to say how the meeting never came to fruition. Okay. Trying to see how the end. Oh, this paragraph is standing out. We live in a society that has prioritized romantic and familial relationships over everything else. So I understand how friendship has gone underappreciated. But still, when I meet people who brag about not trusting anyone enough to befriend them or living or dying alone, for those who just haven't prioritized being someone's homie, it's a huge red flag to me. All it tells me is that you lack certain social skills, especially around showing up as your full self without being asked to. Okay, for the sake of time, I opened with the epilogue, which is titled Real Bitch. And I just want to go back to the portion that has the questions about what it means to be a real bitch one more time to close us out. Okay, here we go. So trap feminism is about the values you were raised with and the conditioning you were socialized under. A lot of trap feminism is about having a heart. It's a unique cocktail of integrity, common sense, confidence, empathy, courage, and resilience. These are traits you cannot quantify or learn out of a textbook. If you've made it this far and you're still wondering whether or not you're a trap feminist, you need to ask yourself something that you've probably never been asked on a job interview or even on a date. And that question is, are you a real bitch? Being a real bitch is fundamentally more important than being a bad bitch, a rich bitch, a freak bitch, or even that bitch, because all of those things are dictated to us by a culture that relies on our subjugation. So to figure out if you're a bad bitch, she gives us these questions. Can you make judgment calls under pressure? Do you say what you mean and mean what you say? And are you principled when it comes to your people? This is the spirit of trap feminism. Thank you all for being here. I got to catch up on the comments. I saw y'all going off and I love it. So yeah, I really actually would love to have continued conversations about this book where we can listen to the tracks. So again, just in case you missed it in the beginning, there is a whole mixtape that goes with this, and each chapter has kind of a track that the writer of this book, Sesali Bowen, put together. So I hope y'all can check that out, and the video will be saved after this. Thank you so much for being here with me today. Y'all are so dope. Let's continue these conversations, and I'll see y'all next time. And yes, happy new moon. I know that's right. Thank you for that, Amani. Okay, I'm gonna end this.